Yeah, and then, he brought it home. And this is going to be the world premiere of Food Fight 95. You guys ready? Yeah! Yes. I actually haven't seen it, so I'm very, very excited. He's worked so hard at it. I want you to give a big round of applause. And please welcome to the stage, Lance Richardson presenting Food Fight 95.
Thank you, John. Y'all get it for John, everybody. Thank you so much. And that's my show, everybody. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming out tonight. We don't validate parking. I'm sorry. No, so this show is about, I'm actually from Mississippi originally, and this show is about it's about 7 minutes of my life that happened in 1995 when I was in 7th grade. When I was in 7th grade, a food fight broke out in my junior high school, and forever my life was changed after that, forever. And you might be like, Lance, why are you talking about this so long afterwards? And I really learned a lot. It was a different time period back then. And if you're doing the math, I was in 7th grade in 1995. I am 76 years old. But thanks to Neutrogena Hydro Boost. Yes, y'all get it for my sponsor, Neutrogena Hydro Boost. Now I'm actually 40, so I've seen some stuff in this world. I've seen some stuff. So this story has 3 parts to it. It's got failure, loneliness, and violence. Those yeah. So it is a comedy show. Before I start with the failure portion of the show, I just have to give a disclaimer to everybody watching at home especially, and that is all the names have been changed in this story. There's some characters I made up, and I still changed their name. Just to be safe, because a lot of these people can come out of the woodwork and still beat my ass. All the names have been changed. Some people change names to protect, the innocent. In this case, I'm protecting the guilty because they're the ones who started this food fight. Several people almost died at this food fight. And that's how you'll learn about it. So, all right, on with the failure portion of it. Chapter 1, failure. So I was never good at school. I think I had ADD, attention to, or as the kids call it, ADHD on the streets. I think I had ADD. Also, I'm a night owl, so not good in the mornings. Any other night owls in here? Yeah, all the comedians wooed on that one. Society doesn't like night owls because, they think you're lazy or like you're sleeping in all the time. But it's really about perspective if you think about it, because we have time zones in this world. Time zones. So really it's just about how you look at things. Like, for instance, did I wake up at 2:30 p.m. today? Yes. In this time zone, I did. I had ADD, night owl, and the worst reason of all was that I was a bad test taker. If you're a bad test taker, you're not good at school. That's just how it works. There's no in between. Luckily, when I was in 2nd grade, my teacher, Miss Burke, came to me. She was like, "Now, Lance, I see that you really pay attention in class. You really seem to follow along. You got that spark in your eyes. But you're doing horribly in my class." And I was just wondering, maybe we could work on your test-taking skills a little bit, sweetie. And I was like, "Yes, Miss Burke, this sounds great." So she gave me the 2 golden rules of test-taking that y'all can take home with you tonight if you're ever in a test situation again. So rule number 1, Miss Burke told me, she's like, "Sweetie, if you ever come to a question that you don't understand, you don't know the answer to, just guess C." Just guess C, sweetie. That's usually C. And I was like, this is great information. This is awesome. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, she was like, "All right, sweetie, now you come to a question that confuses you or you get lost, then then maybe just go with your first instinct. Whatever your first instinct was, just go with that one. Just mark it without even thinking about it. And I was like, great, yeah. But then I started thinking, I was like, Miss Burke, real quick, my first instinct is now C for everything. And she was like, I don't know. So, long story short, I was marking C for a lot of stuff in elementary school. Somehow I made it through. Like, I was in public school, which the Mississippi public schools are held as the greatest school system in the United States. I somehow made it through. I made it through just marking C. I made it through elementary school. 1st through 6th grade is what it was back in those days. And then, so 7th grade was the hardest 2 years of my life, honestly. So that's the failure portion, the 7th grade. And you know, I failed 7th grade. Yes, I admit it, I did. Was it my fault? Yes, mostly my fault. And my poor test-taking skills and my ADD and the other thing I said, I can't even remember now what it was. Now we can rewind to 1994. And by rewind, I mean, that's like a VCR tape term. And for people who are too young to remember VCR tapes, that's like a YouTube video, you know, like a YouTube video is like a VCR tape. And if you're too young to remember YouTube, it's like a long-ass TikTok. That's what a VCR... So we're going to go to the very beginning of a long TikTok, back to 1994, the days of old Kurt T. Cobain. Yeah. So that was the year of the Great Ice Storm. I remember it well. So in 94, I started 7th grade for the first time, and the way that I failed 7th grade, well, my mom put me in this private school. So I've been loose and wild in public school my whole life, you know, doing whatever I want. So I'm not going to give you the real name of this private school, so we'll just call it Banana Academy. Banana Academy was the height of luxury as far as schools go in Southaven, Mississippi itself. So Banana Academy was a private Christian preparatory school. Now, all those words mean things that I wasn't aware of in 1994. One thing is it was a Christian school that was very strict on their dress code, right? You had to wear a collared shirt, khaki pants, you had to wear a belt, and black shoes all the time. And I was so used to just kind of doing whatever I wanted. This was very difficult for my 7th grade self. So, and you know, khakis, collared shirt, belt, you know, Christian school, of course. That's how Jesus dressed. Another thing is preparatory. I didn't know. I learned what that word meant. Because right off the bat at this school, I was not doing well. I was not doing well at all. Like, day one, I had pretty much screwed myself for the rest of the year somehow. And so this is a preparatory school. What that meant is they're going to prepare you for college. Prepare you for college. And I was like, guys, can y'all just prepare me for, like, maybe later this week? Or maybe an hour from now. Who knows? After lunch, can you prepare me for that? Because I don't see anything coming right now. We'll cross the university bridge when we come to it. So with those two things, like, I only went there one semester. And then at the Christmas break, my mom pulled me out of school and she said, all right, you're not doing well at Banana Academy. So we're going to take you out of Banana Academy and we're going to put you back into public school. So I was like, this is the greatest Christmas ever, right? And then she was like, but you know what? Since we're right in the middle of a school year, why don't we homeschool you for another semester? That way, then you can just join your friends in 8th grade when you get back to public school. I was like, things went from better to even better. What homeschool turned out to be is what they call harder than it seems. And it wasn't academically harder. In fact, it was academically much, much easier. The hard part about homeschool is that I was an only child. So I was the entire student body. at this school. I was the only person there. So all I really talked to was my mom. I felt very alone and isolated. That was the hard part about homeschool. I was like, yeah, this is great, but at the end of the day, I wanted socialization. I felt like I needed that deep down. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what I actually needed. That was the hard part about homeschool. Another thing about the year 1994, this was actually the very beginning of 1995 because that semester had changed. Do y'all know who OJ Simpson is? OJ Simpson is a retired American football player who in those days was on trial for murder, okay? He was on trial for murder. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not he definitely did this crime. But what you need to know about 1995 is that every television set in the world, especially in the United States, was on court TV, constantly watching court TV. Everyone was watching court TV. The adults were watching court TV. I was watching court TV. The homeschoolers were watching court TV. My mom watched so much court TV back then that, like, when you turn the TV off, you could still see the logo of court TV burned into the bottom right of the screen. I was like, you could feel the TV. She's been watching the OJ trial again. So this was going on all across the United States. So basically, since my mom was the entire faculty of my school, I was watching a lot of OJ trying to earn extra credit like a good student. So that was going on. And one positive thing about this time period is one of my textbooks, the fine arts portion of the textbook, was this right here. This is the actual book from 1995 that my mom bought me, and I was enthralled with this. This is Cartooning with the Simpsons, a complete guide to drawing all the Simpsons characters, which I was like totally into. Like, I was drawing this. I was spending hours a day. So basically, all of this homeschool semester, I was drawing Bart Simpson and watching OJ Simpson. Such a 90s kid. That's the most 90s story you'll ever hear. So the time actually went by. It flew by pretty quick. And that semester went by really, really quick. And then it was summertime, and it was almost time to go back to public school. I hadn't failed yet. So I went back to public school, like, I think a week or two before the actual classes started. And there was a counselor there, and I'm not going to give you his name, so let's say Mr. Funk. Mr. Funk was there, and Mr. Funk was like, welcome back to public school, Lance. You're going to love it here again. You haven't missed much. So he's like, I understand you've been at Banana Academy. I'm like, yes, sir. So he's like, sit down. We're going to give you a placement test for what classes you're going to take in 8th grade, because we don't know where you've been all over. So we're just gonna give you this placement test and to see what classes you take in 8th grade. And I was like, okay, great, thank you, Mr. Funk. So he plops this thick ass test. I mean, this test is thick. He plops it down. It was like a phone book. Now, do y'all remember phone books? A phone book, like, for those of you who don't know, is where they take a whole tree and make one book out of it. And they deliver this book to your door every 2 days, whether you need it or not. So every time they printed a phone book, the ozone was heating up a little bit, just tinging a little bit. So he plops this placement test down, and I'm just looking at this thing sweating already. My ADD is like kicking in. I'm like, oh, crap. So I'm like, whatever, I'm ready for this, So I start looking at it. I'm like, oh, crap. I'm like flipping over. I'm just marking. Yeah, okay, all right, I see. Yep. I don't know. There was a lot of C's on this test. My answers were a lot of C's. So I'm like, I don't know this one. All right, C. Okay, keep going. I get to the end of this test. Can you believe it? Not a single question about OJ Simpson or the whole trial in general. So I'm like, I'm screwed on this test. I'm definitely not going to be taking AP courses in 8th grade. I know that for a fact. So I turned it in, and Mr. Funk's like, all right, well, this is going to take me a few days to grade. So he's like, we'll call you. He called me back called my mom a few days later and brought us in, and he's like, Lance, sit down for a second. Now, we've looked at your placement exam, and you know what? We've decided to place you in all 7th grade classes again. So I was like rocked by this. I was like very upset that he had done this. I was like, wait a minute, Mr. Funk, this was a comprehensive test for the whole year? And he was like, you know the word comprehensive? I was like, yes, I know the word. I've been taking damn college classes at Banana Academy over here. And also, I'm a qualified paralegal in the state of California. Because I've been watching so much OJ. And he was like, I don't know what to tell you. That's just the rules. That's the state rules for public school if you can't pass this test. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? He was like, we didn't want to make you nervous. I was like, nervousness is a natural human reaction to having to perform, you know? So it didn't matter what I did or said to Mr. Funk. Nothing would change his mind. I had failed 7th grade because of that test. Not because of the whole year of drawing Bart or whatever. Like, because of that one test. So this was a dark, you know, I joke about it nowadays, but this was literally one of the darkest moments in my life. Because y'all remember how it was in school? Like, if you got held back a year, like, it was like, that was an eternity from your classmates who had gone on to the next grade. So I was very upset, and things went from bad to worse at that point because I actually started attending Southaven Jr High School for 7th grade version 1.02. So that's the failure portion of it. That's how I failed 7th grade. Now, the loneliness portion. Yeah, so the loneliness portion was pretty much the first month or so of 7th grade at Southaven Jr High School because these kids were bad. These were bad kids. You're not supposed to call bad kids bad, but in 1995 you could do whatever you wanted. Yeah, in fact, you could scream in a baby's face if they did something wrong. You're stupid, baby! Yeah, things were different back then. Yeah, these kids were definitely bad, though. They were just, I mean, first of all, I was the smallest kid in school. I was very small. And I was like, I hadn't hit my growth spurt yet. But then I was like, wait a minute, I got held back a year. How am I the smallest kid in school? Turns out that all the kids in that school had been held back. Some of them many times. Several times they had been held back. Yeah, so I was competing with like other 7th graders that were driving to school. I was like, did I see you giving the teacher a ride to school today? Yeah, we're corporal and, you know, trying to keep for the next generation. We're trying to give on. Yeah, so I was the smallest kid in school, and they were so bad. This class, I saw a fist fight every day. You know, like literally a fist fight, because you know at that age, like they're buck wild. And this school was overcrowded, and it shared a campus with an overcrowded high school, and both schools were understaffed. So it was Mad Max for sure, like in this school. So I was trying to keep a low profile, you know. I didn't want anything to do with it, but this led me to be very, very isolated, even more so than homeschool. I was like, how am I more alone than I was in homeschool? This doesn't make any sense. So that went on for 3 weeks or so. I was just and that was really, even to this day, the lowest point of my life. Like, that time period right there was the lowest time period in my whole life, because I was just so alone, and I thought, I'm never going to get out of 7th grade, and it just keeps getting worse. I longed for khakis and collared shirts at that school. I was like, please just bring back khakis and collared shirts, anything to get me out of this situation at Southaven Jr High School. So I don't know if y'all have ever heard the saying, it's darkest before the dawn. It's always darkest before the dawn. I don't know if y'all have heard that, but some early bird made that shit up. But in this situation, it was true, because the dawn was coming finally after a month of being in this school. I don't know how I made it through one day of that, but after a month of this, my guardian angel showed up, and that was Kevin Newsom. Kevin Newsom, y'all remember Kevin? Y'all remember Kevin Newsom? Biggest guy in school, huge. And he hadn't been held back that many times. He was actually just big dude, you know. Like he was about my height now. He had arms like tree trunks, you know. He had a full beard, 7th grade, full beard. The first day of school, he was in my biology class, and the first day of school, I was like, okay, we can start. The teacher is here, we can start. And Kevin, he sat right behind me in biology class, and for that first month, he was there the whole time. That's the ironic part. My guardian angel was right behind me the whole time, copying off my tests. And like, what was weird is like I could hear Kevin breathing because he was so big, you know. I could hear him copying off my tests, and I was thinking, Kevin, like I've failed just like everybody else here. Like, just put C if you don't know the answer. I'll save you the trouble. But of course, I wasn't going to talk to Kevin. I was so scared of him. I was scared of everybody, much less the biggest kid in school. So one fateful day, my biology teacher came in and said, okay, guys, I'm feeling a little under the weather. And back in those days, you had to work regardless, because this was long before COVID-19. So he was like, I know I'm feeling sick, so just kind of, I'm going to be here, but we're going to have a free day today. A free day, so just to kind of work on whatever you want, kind of keep it down. So we were like, great, okay. So it was a free day, so what did I start doing? I started drawing Bart Simpson, as I've been classically trained to do. So I'm drawing Bart Simpson, and lo and behold, I think it was out of force of habit, Kevin looks over my shoulder to see what I'm doing. There's no test, but he's like, oh, hey, you're drawing Bart Simpson. That looks really good. And I was like shocked that Kevin was talking to me. I was like, wow, Kevin Newsom. I'm like, yeah, thank you. And he was like, can you draw Homer Simpson? And I'm like, yes, sir. So I just start drawing Homer Simpson. I drew Homer Simpson like 10 seconds. And I gave it to him. And he was like, dude, this is just like the cartoon. How did you do this? And I'm like, I can draw more. So I drew, Lisa, Maggie, Marge. I'm drawing every Simpsons character I can come up with. I'm even making up characters, like trying to impress Kevin. And each one that I give him, he's getting more and more impressed by this. He's like, oh, wow, this is cool, man. You're a decent guy. Like, I like you. And so we get to chit-chatting, and we realize we're the same age. in spite of our vast physical differences, Kevin and I are the same age. So he was like, hey, man, this weekend there's a church lock-in at the Trinity down the street. You want to go to that with me? And I was like, are you serious? I would love that. Now, somebody might be confused in here what a church lock-in is. Now, a church lock-in is like usually in like rural communities or in the South. They have like the church, the community will come in. They'll get all the young kids. They'll bring them into the church and lock them in, and lock them in the church for one night. And strongest will survive. No, it's not really like that. It's like the church lock-in was like sports. They had like a gym in there. We played volleyball. We played basketball. We even played some football, some foosball, and some like air hockey and stuff. It was so much fun. You didn't even think about the fact that you couldn't get out. It didn't even cross your mind after a while. So Kevin and I went to this, and we immediately bonded. Like we were, I was like that the little fish swimming beside the shark. You know those little fish. So like all of a sudden we had broken into symbiosis at that point. Like we were together and we were helping each other. I was giving him art and he was giving me protection. And like no one would mess with Kevin. And this is an important thing about this whole story is that Kevin, like he was there physically, his presence there like unlocked my personality. Like it made me feel like myself because I was like, I can do whatever I want. And if Kevin's around, it's not gonna mean anything because he's not going to let anything happen to me. So I felt that safety, and I was able to become what I consider myself today. That was the bright part. That was the dawn happening right there. And it turns out, I gave back to Kevin too, because it turns out the biggest kid in school was just as lonely as the smallest kid in school. It turns out, because he was also a freak like me, And so this happening, this convergence of Kevin and I happened at the perfect time, because what was about to happen was the violence portion of this show. And the namesake, the food fight. The food fight 95 happened on a Tuesday. Yeah, the Tuesday is the worst day, as we all know. Tuesday's so bad, even Wednesday's like, I don't associate with him. I don't want to do this. So one fateful Tuesday, which, by the way, we had lunch at 10:30 in the morning. We were in an overcrowded school. And they were like, just put the first 7th graders in there. Like, let's put 200 7th graders in there at 10:30 in the morning. We had just had breakfast, When you have lunch at 10:30 in the morning, your food looks a lot less like food and a lot more like a weapon. So we were just eyeing that food like, what's this even for? So that's one big reason for the food fight. The other big reason is a fella named Chris Vine. Chris Vine was the baddest kid in school, and he led a group called the Bad Kids. Everyone called them the Bad Kids. So the Bad Kids were an organized crime syndicate started in 1933 by Al Capone. No, they literally, Chris Vine put so much time and effort into, nobody in the school knew except for the Bad Kids' inner circle that there was going to be a food fight that day, but they had been waiting for the perfect time because Chris Vine had been watching the teachers and watching the coaches and watching the lunch ladies. He knew when the principal made their rounds. He knew the vice principal's wife was on maternity leave. He knew everything about the school, and he had been studying, and he had taken time off from class to do this all semester. He was like, this is my life's calling, to plan the greatest food fight ever. In fact, in 27 years, somebody's going to be talking about it in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. This is how badass I'm going to make this food fight. So he had been planning it, and Chris Vine was a bad dude, and he was probably pretty old. I'm not sure. Records don't indicate when he was born, but he was old and he was bad. So I guess this particular Tuesday he saw his chance. I guess like all the teachers, everybody was gone for that one, like that lunar eclipse where everything lines up and there's just 200 7th graders in a lunchroom by themselves. And what he did to start it all was fairly innocent. He just took his Salisbury steak and he just underhanded it 2 tables away and it splatted. That's all that was that was the first shot fired of that day in 1995. And so that splatted. Kevin and I are sitting together at lunch, of course, and we're across the lunchroom, and we hear laughter coming from the bad kids section. We're like, whatever, bad kids. They probably just got a gun or something. Who gives a shit? They probably brought a car into the lunchroom. Who cares? So we just hear laughter, and we think nothing of it. But apparently what happened is that Salisbury steak, which y'all remember Salisbury steak, right? It's a hunk of inedible meat that they serve seventh graders. So he took that and it splatted, and then that table apparently returned fire with a handful of crinkle fries. And that's it. That was the initial blast, and we were like, okay, everything's fine, it's good. But then Craig James took. Do y'all remember those? First of all, Craig James was the second in command at the Bad Kids. He was Chris Vine's right-hand man. So he saw that the food fight hadn't kicked off yet. So what he did was he took one of those little chocolate milks that we used to get at lunch, and he just cracked it open just ever so slightly. And this is one of the miracles of the food fight, everyone. So he takes it and he sidearm slings it over the top into the atmosphere of this lunchroom. So it's spiraling up, and then it makes this beautiful pinwheel effect, like perfectly distributing little bits of chocolate milk raining down over the entire student body right there. And then it miraculously curves back around and comes back to the bad kids section. So every one of the kids in this entire lunchroom had some amount of chocolate milk on them. And then they were like, this is an act of war. You have done it now, Craig James and Chris Vine. It is fully kicked off. So then Shelly Smith, of course, she stands up on her chair and yells food fight. Now, you've got to yell food fight for tax purposes. Like, you got to do that so the government knows what you're doing with your food. So once Shelly Smith had yelled food fight, everyone starts throwing everything. But when Kevin heard it yelled, he was like, okay, he looks down at me. He's like, all right, buddy, we're going to get you out of here. Because somebody's liable to throw you in this because you're so small. So I'm like, yes, sir, let's go. And so we start going out. We try to start weaving in and out. And there's like some glass double doors on the back side of the cafeteria. So we're trying to get over there. And as we're going, I'm just seeing like this horror show of people throwing things. Because when people got chocolate milk on their clothes, they decided it's time to throw everything we can put our hands on at the bad kids. And the bad kids were like, yeah, they threw stuff at us. We can throw things back. They threw everything on their trays. Then when they got done with their tray, they threw the tray. And then when they got done with that, they were like, oh, I'll throw my books. They're like, I'm not going to need these where I'm going. And they're just like, put me back in jail. I don't give a shit. And so I'm just watching this horror show, and we pass Cedric Brown. He's up on his chair as well, and he's got an apple in his head, innocent enough. But in this story, apple represents sin. So he has this apple in his hand, and he takes a bite out of it like he's pulling the pin from a grenade. You know what I mean? And he spits it out. And then he baseball laser beams it into the bad kid section, more specifically directly into Nicole Cressman's forehead. And by the sound of it, everyone in the cafeteria was like, she's knocked out cold. Like, this apple disintegrated on spot. So these are the type of stuff I'm seeing as I'm trying to get to that glass double door. I'm in Kevin's shadow just trying to get through this. And he's like, we'll be fine. And I knew deep down in his voice he wasn't sure that we were going to be fine. So we finally get close to the glass doors. We're about 3 feet away. Kevin and I are both there. and we're about to get to the glass doors when in comes Chris Vine. Of all people, Chris Vine, and he kicks open the glass double doors right there, and he's got a shirt full of wild cherry Pepsis. Unopened cans of Pepsi. And his shirt's full of them. So he starts taking them out of his shirt, baseball throwing. Unopened cans. And they're just exploding. And they're hitting people in the face. And I'm like, wow, an apple seemed bad before. But now these wild cherry Pepsis. So we finally get to, we sidestep, we don't have any problems with Chris Vine, and we sidestep, we're finally safe. Kevin and I are both outside those glass double doors, like looking back inside, like what the hell just happened? Like this all popped off in like a minute's time. It seemed like maybe 2 minutes, all this was going on. And then, like in retrospect, when I think about the food fight, I was like, Chris Vine started the food fight. Then he shows back up 2 minutes later coming inside the lunchroom with a shirt full of wild cherry Pepsis. So presumably he started the food fight, and then he was like, Craig James, I'm going to leave this to you. And then he left and went outside, and there was always a line at this Pepsi machine. He waited in line. It's like, I got to get going. God, is it happening yet? Okay, all right, okay. All right, and then he finally gets to the front of the line, gets out his change, 75 cents each, puts them in, gets the wild cherry Pepsis, fills his shirt up, and then throws them one by one. I mean, this is next level evil that we're dealing with. You know, he had about 8 kills that day. So Kevin and I, though, were in safety. We were finally there in safety. And I still remember the sound of all the food hitting the glass doors. It sounded like a hailstorm outside. I was like, wow, geez, this is really crazy. But there was low visibility through the glass doors because of all the food. But we could see what was going on, and it was just like, it was a horror show. And people, a lot of times, like, this food fight only lasted 7 minutes, but in food fight time, 7 minutes is 100 years. I mean, that's a long food fight. And people say, how did they not run out of food or books or whatever? Well, all the food was perfect. This was part of the miracle as well of the food fight. Is like, we had corn dogs that day, very reusable. Very reusable. So like a corn dog is like a breaded hot dog on a stick. You take that and you throw it, and then it comes back to you, you know, maybe the stick's gone, you know? And then you throw that a couple times, the breading falls off, right? And then you have a wiener. That's all you have is just a wiener right then. And then you throw that, and then 2 wieners come back. It's like crazy. So another thing we had that day was the Salisbury steak that I mentioned. The original start of the whole thing was the Salisbury steak, and those things were durable, okay? The way those lunch ladies made those Salisbury steak, those weren't going nowheres. In fact, I'm sure that original Salisbury steak that Chris Vine tossed is still in the atmosphere somewhere. It's like still a hunk somewhere beneath the ground of the lunchroom somewhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not biodegradable. And then the third thing was the apples we had. Apples were huge for throwing. High accuracy. They weren't going to disintegrate unless you got a kill shot. And a funny fact about apples and Southaven school systems, I never again saw a whole apple for the rest of my days there. And I graduated from there, and I never again, they were like, don't give those kids apples. They don't know how to handle themselves. But we did have apple slices, you know, or apple sauce format, but never again whole apples. Another question I get a lot about the food fight itself was, didn't the teachers ever return? For 7 minutes they were gone? Basically, you know, for about minute 5 we started seeing, like Kevin and I were out the glass doors. There were teachers coming back from their break or studying or mission planning or whatever they're doing. And And they came back in, and I would see the look in their face when they saw what was going on in there, and then they just turned around and left. And who could blame them, really? Can you blame a teacher back in those days? In 1995, I don't think health insurance was invented yet. And they're like, should I spend my wage taking a Pepsi to the head? I'm good. I'm going to take a personal day today for my own mental health. And those didn't exist either before that. So the craziest thing about the whole food fight day, that whole Tuesday, the craziest thing that happened was not the food fight itself, not all that crazy stuff I saw when I was following Kevin through the lunchroom or watching through the glass doors. The craziest thing that happened was that the teachers and the principals and the coaches, nobody said anything about it that whole rest of the day. Because what ended the food fight was the bell rang. That's all that ended it. So it was just like, the kids heard a bell and they were like, oh yeah, I'm a person in this world. They were warriors before, There was girls leaving the lunchroom with like mustard and ketchup in their hair, on either side, perfectly split. There were guys leaving the lunchroom with no shirts on, and they went the rest of the day with no shirt on. Everyone was covered in like this mashed potato type substance, which was confusing because we didn't even have mashed potatoes that day. And we were like, is that like a conglomeration of other foods? Like, what is that slime that you've got on you? So, so the crazy thing was they didn't say anything. The teachers didn't say anything. There were boys in the class with no shirts on. They were like, this is regular. Because everybody knew what happened. Nothing was said that day. And then the next day, that was the first thing that was said at 10:29 a.m., lunchtime. The principal came on the intercom and he was like, attention first lunch. Because of your actions yesterday, we are going to have silent lunch for the rest of the year. And we're going to dim the lights in the lunchroom to remind y'all to keep it quiet. And anybody saying anything will be expelled indefinitely. And we were like, oh, we've really done it this time. This is tough. So we went to lunch, and, pretty much right away, they couldn't control us. We were all scared at first, and then we were like, wait, there's no way they can handle 200 people. There's no way. So the silent lunch kind of held together for 3 days. For 3 days, we were quiet in the lunchroom, and that was our punishment for attempted murder on many, many counts. And I never again saw Chris Vine. I never again saw him. I think he was maybe deported. Or, let's look at it on the bright side. Maybe he's planning a food fight in a penitentiary somewhere right now. So that was the actual end of the violence portion. Yeah, so that's the three main parts. Now, epilogue. The epilogue of the whole thing. Why am I still talking about this food fight? Even though it's crazy, why would I still be talking about it 27 years later, And the reason is because I feel like it was the end of an era for me. That food, I don't think the food fight caused the era to end, but I think it was the end of an era. The timing of it was perfect. I think that, when we had to sit there quietly in lunch, I think that was the universe kind of being like, all right, this is a moment of silence because your childhood is dead. It's over now. Childhood was over. And everything did change after the food fight. Everything changed. I hit a little growth spurt there. I started growing a little facial hair. It does come in sometimes still to this day. It's nowhere near like Kevin's, don't worry. I started taking interest in dating, so I was dating, everything. I was like a young adult at that point. And I went from a child, I was definitely a child before the food fight. And then after I witnessed some of those atrocities, I was like, I've seen some shit. I'm a man now. So that whole arc that was the end of that era right there, the food fight. And, at the beginning, I was talking about failure, loneliness, and violence, the 3 parts of that. And I actually have the antidote to all 3 of those negative things. And what is the antidote? Friendship. Friendship. Yeah. Yeah, because Kevin saved my life. Yeah, and thank you. Yeah. Kevin saved my life, and not only like maybe in the actual food fight, but just in general, because I was in the darkest place in my life at that point. And I guess my call to action is if you have a best friend or a good friend, maybe call them or email them as soon as possible and tell them that you love them. And if you don't have any friends, maybe start learning to draw The Simpsons. And then one last thing in closing, what I wanted to say about the whole food fight and the whole story is that when I found this book earlier, like last year, I found this book, and it kind of led to me writing this whole thing. I was like, this reminded me of 7th grade for 2 years, and this reminded me of Kevin, of course, and I was helping my parents move houses is when I found this book, and I was like knee deep in nostalgia. I was like, and my dad was very stubborn about this was my childhood home. He didn't want to let this home go. But they're getting older. They wanted a smaller house. They needed, they didn't want to be going up and down stairs all the time. And so they were like, we're finally going to give this house up, but we want it to go to the right person, right? And so I went back home to Mississippi, and I was helping them move, and I ran across this book. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah, this is great. And then, but you know who they found to live in that house? The only person that my dad felt comfortable with moving into that house was Kevin Newsom. Yeah. And his 3 daughters and his wife are living there now. Yeah. So that's a 100% true story. And his oldest daughter has my old room. And the same room Kevin and I used to have sleepovers in, and she's an artist. So she might be drawing Bart Simpson right now as we speak. Or maybe learning about OJ Simpson. Who knows? So thank y'all so much for coming to this and sitting and listening. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Once again, I'm so thankful for the opportunity to do it in Black Cat. Like, I ran this show, 20-something times in Edinburgh. You see that look on Aisha's face. She's probably mouthing along the words with me because she's heard it so many times. But every time I did it in Edinburgh, I was like, man, I wish we were at Black Cat. And that's not a joke. Like, I love the vibe of this place. So anytime y'all are in the neighborhood or you have friends around, like, bring them to Black Cat. Y'all spend some money here because this is a great place. Y'all get up for Justin for having us here. So thank you so much to my producers, Aisha Sluis, John Randall, your host, everybody, and Yad, and MGT helped on some construction at the beginning. Thank you so much.